For years, the truth stayed hidden, the victims forgotten, the cases left cold, until science revealed what time could not. This is decades in the dark, where cold cases are brought back to light. You rent out a room in your home. The man who answers your ad seems normal, polite, quiet, safe. He fills out an application. He gives a name, a story, a reason for being there. You check everything. You verify what you can. Nothing stands out. Nothing feels wrong. And you let him in. Days later, you're dead, and the man you trusted never existed. On May 25, 2004, the body of 53-year-old Al Kite was discovered in the basement of his home. What investigators found immediately set this case apart. This was not a quick attack. It was not impulsive. Al Kite had been bound, beaten, tortured, and stabbed. Just days before, everything had been routine. Al was preparing to rent out part of his home, something he had done before. He followed a process: applications, conversations, verification. He didn't rush decisions. He didn't take unnecessary risks. Then one applicant stood out, a man calling himself Robert Cooper. He said he worked for Wells Fargo and had recently relocated. He was well-dressed, calm, and polite. Witnesses remembered small details: dark hair, middle-aged, average build, walking with a limp and using a cane. One person believed he had a slight Romanian accent. Nothing about him screamed danger. And that's what made him dangerous. At some point, the arrangement was finalized. The lease was in place. The man had access. He was inside the home. To anyone watching from the outside, everything looked normal. But investigators would later believe this wasn't random. The man calling himself Robert Cooper had actively searched for renters, targeting people who posted ads. He hadn't just answered an opportunity. He had created one. The last confirmed contact with Al Kite came on May 22, 2004. After that, nothing. No calls returned, no messages, no appearances at work. By May 24th, concern started to build. This wasn't normal behavior. Al didn't just disappear. A welfare check was requested. Officers arrived at the home. From the outside, everything looked normal. No forced entry, no broken windows, no immediate signs of violence. Which meant one thing: even before they stepped inside, whoever had done this had been allowed in. They entered carefully, moving room to room. Everything appeared in place until they reached the basement. That's where they found him. Al Kite was lying face down, hog-tied, surrounded by blood. And immediately, investigators knew this had taken time. This hadn't happened in seconds or even minutes. It had unfolded over hours. Reconstructing the crime, investigators believe the attack began near the stairs. Al was likely helping his new tenant, possibly carrying something, possibly distracted. That's when he was struck. A blow to the head, sudden and disorienting, enough to take control. From that moment forward, the situation was no longer equal. It was controlled. Al was restrained, not loosely, not quickly, but in a very specific way. He was hog-tied, a method that required time and intention. Investigators described it as deliberate, almost ritualistic. Once restrained, he was no longer able to fight back, and the attacker now had exactly what he needed: time. What followed was prolonged. Al was tortured for hours while bound. One method identified was falaka, a form of torture involving repeated striking or cutting of the feet. This is not something seen in impulsive violence. It requires patience, control, intent. The attacker moved through the house, pausing, returning, continuing. There was no urgency, no panic, only control. This wasn't rage, it was methodical. At some point, the violence escalated further. Knives from the kitchen were used. The attack became more severe, more direct. Investigators documented approximately 22 stab wounds to the upper body. The injuries were deliberate and targeted. This was the final stage of a prolonged assault that had already gone on for hours. And then, it ended. But the killer didn't leave. He stayed. He ate food from the refrigerator, used the bathroom, showered. At some point, he even slept in the house. Then he began cleaning. The knives were placed in the sink and covered with bleach. The shower drain was treated with bleach. Objects were gathered and arranged. This wasn't panic. It was controlled exit behavior. When leaving, he took Al's wallet, phone, and truck. He drove to an ATM and attempted to withdraw money. Surveillance footage captured a man wearing a ski mask driving Al's truck. He withdrew money, but not all that was available. Another strange detail. The truck was later recovered near the home. The phone was discarded in a payphone booth. Investigators quickly realized Robert Cooper wasn't real. The address was fake. The social security number belonged to someone else. The phone was a prepaid burner purchased weeks earlier. There was no Wells Fargo connection. He had built a complete identity just long enough to gain access, and then erased it. But he made one mistake. He left behind a drop of blood. Investigators recovered it from the scene. It didn't belong to Al Kite. It belonged to the killer. That single drop contained a full DNA profile. It was entered into CODIS, but at the time there were no matches. Years passed, no leads, no answers, until investigators tried something new. Instead of searching for the killer, they searched for his relatives. Using forensic genetic genealogy, they found distant DNA matches and began building a family tree, expanding outward, then narrowing inward. Branch by branch, name by name. Eventually, one name remained: Bogdan Buzayanu. Investigators obtained a DNA sample linked to him and compared it to the crime scene evidence. It matched. The man who called himself Robert Cooper finally had a real identity. In 2021, after 17 years, he was located overseas and arrested on a U.S. warrant. But extradition is complicated, slow, and uncertain, which means even now, the final chapter of this case may not be fully written. For 17 years, Al Kite's killer had no name, no past, no trace, just DNA. But in the end, that was enough, because even the smallest piece of evidence can outlast a lie. This is Decades in the Dark, where science brings the past to light. Subscribe for more stories where justice never expires.